Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Camille, and I'll be teaching Getting into Beekeeping today. We do have a split class, so we have some people in person, we do have some people online. I will be doing my best to split my attention between both. Please feel free, as far as Zoom attendees, to type in any questions in the chat window, and I will get to them as I can. Everyone else, I'm going to try to repeat your questions and then answer them, so everyone on Zoom can also benefit from that. And let's begin. So this is quite a long class. I'm going to try to have an intermission somewhere in the middle. We've got quite a bit to go through. Some of it is simpler than others. Some of it maybe you already know, but I'm going to try to give you a full understanding of beekeeping, its sources, all the equipment involved, and why it's involved. So we'll go over brief benefits of beekeeping, a history of beekeeping, which will make beekeeping in current times make a little bit more sense. Some reasons why bees may be in trouble and things that you can do to help, when and how to begin. This is kind of a loaded question and there's a lot of different opinions out there. So I'll try to just kind of clean things up a little bit, make it a little bit easier to understand. We'll go over Langstroth specific hive composition, placement, and terminology of the parts therein. An entirely separate chapter is the frames, because when you're talking about equipment and frames, you're going to get mixed up. So we'll separate that, make it make a little bit more sense. Beekeeping, essential tools and apparel. I'm not going to try and get you guys to get all the gizmos and gadgets out there. I'm going to try and get you a cohesive list of things that you will absolutely need in your beekeeping ventures. Social organization of bees, differences between queens and drones and workers, and what their jobs are inside the hive. We'll briefly go over bee breeds. Do you want Italian, Carniolan, so on and so forth. And then the procuring and installation of packages, nukes, and swarms. And then we'll go over a couple of additional resources. It's always a good idea to expand your horizons, ask more than one person, use more than one resource. So that'll be where we end, is continuing education. So the benefits of beekeeping. These are just a couple pointers. There are lots of benefits out there. Pollination is probably one of the main things that everyone knows about. Fruits, veggies, herbs, flowers. Most of our food requires pollination at some point or another. There are wind pollinated things out there as well. They may not need bees, but bees may need them. Hazelnuts, for example, are wind pollinated, but the bees can still feed on the pollen from the hazelnuts. Actually, an important really early spring or late winter resource for them. Obviously the honey, it's delicious in desserts. You can use it as a sugar substitute. You can use it to make alcoholic beverages like mead, slightly less alcoholic beverages like June, kombucha, but made with honey instead of sugar. Honey butter is wonderful in just about everything. Local honey can help with allergies. There's not a whole lot of scientific evidence out there to say one way or the other, but a lot of people do swear by it. And it's anti-everything. It's antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, antihistamine. So a lot of people will use honey as a topical for burns, cuts, and stings instead of like a Neosporin or something. The only annoying part is it is kind of sticky, but usually when you're hurt, you're not really worried about sticky.
I actually did hear that in more ancient times for serious battles and wounds. I mean, that was what they had.
Yes.
You know,
Excellent.
get hit by an axe or a sword, you probably. But yeah, I've heard that would.
The wax also has quite a few uses. Just a couple listed here. You can use it in candles, seals on bottles and envelopes, wood finish, polish, chapstick, lotions, soaps, and the list just goes on from there. Propolis, you may or may not have heard of propolis, but propolis is basically bee glue. It's usually kind of a coppery to black substance that's very, very sticky. And bees use this to line their hives, to patch up any holes, to make it a little bit more hygienic. Just like honey, it has a lot of medicinal properties. It's antiviral, bacterial, fungal, anti-inflammatory, and antihistamine. It is very strong. So if you're using this for any kind of wound treatment, maybe don't leave it on for too long. You can use it for a toothache, but eventually it will burn the inside of your mouth. So don't leave it too long. And beekeeping is a rewarding learning experience. You'll never run out of things to learn. Don't be discouraged because nobody learns it all in a day. Most people don't learn it all in a lifetime. A brief history of beekeeping, and this does relate to beekeeping today. Trying to keep this brief, it's only 2 slides. Early humans, I didn't mean early, like cradle of civilization early, began as robbers of bee nests. Even then, they understood that there was a lot of value to the honey, the brood, the wax. They used it as food, drink, medicine as well, and even currency. And the creation of mead does predate the creation of beer, which I think is kind of a fun fact. The earliest records of human interactions with bees date back to 8,000 to 6,000 BC in rock paintings. The ones photoed here, the top one is found in Spain and the bottom is in Zimbabwe. The earliest domestication of bees, that is humans actually taking bees into a domesticated area for specific harvest, dates to 970 to 930 BC. Tel Rehav, Israel, had quite the large apiary, 75 to 200 horizontal hives. And these are made of just sun-dried mud. Simple as that. It's kind of hard to tell all these years later how many there were because they do kind of decay over time. Sorry about that. First class of the year, I always forget to turn the phone off. So sun-dried mud, this is going to bring us to the next point of you can basically make a beehive out of anything. When bee husbandry began, hives were built using the cheapest, most abundant materials per region, and this is still true today. Gums, which is basically just a hollowed out tree, can be moved around. There's already a beehive in there. They're attracted to it. There's the pheromones, the smells in there that will attract new swarms to it. Gums were put into villages for use as beehives. Sun-dried mud, like you saw in Tel Rehav. Fired clay, reed baskets insulated with mud or even dung. And then like we use today, wood. And you'll even see plastic hives today. I don't know if they're too much cheaper these days, but basically the idea is any material that can be used that is effective and cost efficient is used for beehives. Throughout the centuries, bees have been used as a direct resource collection, pollination, and even warfare. Rhododendron honey along the Black Sea is potent to the point it's actually toxic. It's also called mad honey. And if you look into this, I'm keeping it brief here, but definitely check it out. Several instances in history where entire armies were subdued just by this honey. The local villagers didn't have any weapons, so what were they going to do against an entire army? Invite them over to a party, feed them a bunch of honey, and in the morning they were too sick or dead to fight.
So quick question there, or do you?
Go for it.
Okay, if you have rhododendrons on your property, should you remove them or is it diluted by all?
Excellent question. So the question was, if we have rhododendrons, should we be concerned? And the answer is absolutely not. We do not have the concentration of rhododendrons that it requires to have mad honey. Along the Black Sea, there is such a dense population of rhododendrons, there's not much else. So the honey is incredibly concentrated. We have a lot of rhododendrons around here, but not nearly enough to create any kind of problems. You'll never notice any kind of mad honey around here. So rhodies are fine. They're a decent resource. The bees can use the flowers. No concerns.
Okay.
Skeps. So skeps are the woven basket hives. Pretty common that you see them as an icon of bee husbandry. They're just a little basket, upturned basket. Skep booby traps during the castle age, kind of interesting. If an army were to break through a castle wall, the castle wall would be connected to a bunch of skeps on the side. And then like a booby trap, they'd all knock over, all the bees would be let loose, you'd run back from the gate, and that would buy you some time. So bees have been used in warfare quite a bit. If you go back, the history is quite interesting. Going into closer to the future here, movable frames have been experimented with quite some time. L.L. Langstroth is not the first person to have come up with this, but he did refine it with regards to bee space in 1852. And Linkstrasse hive is now the most widely used hive configuration today. It's what we have. It's your typical tall box structure. But he revolutionized it for everyone for sure. Where bees are found today, they're found in nature, typically in living trees. You're not going to see a skep in a dead tree. You might see remnants of a hive in a dead tree, but honeybees, if given the choice, they will go to a live tree. It gives them better insulation. It gives them, it's basically just better for them altogether. If you see honeycomb on the outside of a tree, like you see in the middle photo here, that isn't necessarily a good sign. Usually it means that the bees couldn't decide on a proper nesting site and they just started building comb where they swarmed. This is pretty unlikely to make it through the winter. So if a beekeeper sees this, they'll probably go and they'll collect that swarm and they'll try and rehome it. Bees are more and more commonly found in the backyard. Most places don't have many rules or regulations, so you can have beehives in particularly urban areas. I've seen it as small as in a backyard smaller than this classroom and right next to a math. Apparently they didn't have any issues. So you can find beehives in pretty small areas, rooftops, backyards. They're always in pretty close proximity to each other in these instances. They're low to the ground, so certain precautions need to be made against skunks and other small pests.
Is it one of those things that's complaint driven?
That's a good question. Is it complaint driven? The only real law as far as beekeeping in this particular area in Corvallis, Albany, Philomath, it is literally a nuisance law. So you could get in trouble for beekeeping the same way your noisy neighbor could get in trouble for playing his music.
Your neighbor's allergic to bees or something, they might complain, but.
Exactly. It's a nuisance basis. And if you have good communication with your neighbors and good habits, then there shouldn't be any issues. We are going to go over bee law a little bit more in further slides as well. And most people think of bees in commercial operations. There's intense management, pallets, power equipment, zero spacing. Usually there will be four hives per pallet, could be even more. But a lot of people knock the commercial beekeepers. Take the time to get to know them. They're usually really cool people, and there wouldn't really be backyard beekeeping without the commercial guys. So they keep the hobby going, they keep the research going, they keep the pollination going. So ultimately the commercial guys are there with us and they're here to help us. So don't knock them too hard. Why bees are in trouble. The nature of bee foraging is widespread. So it can make them extremely susceptible to pesticides, particularly pesticides that fall on flowers. Don't ever spray when things are actually in flower. You got 2 or 3 flowers on a plant, just cover them with some plastic baggies, spray, and then once it's dry, you can remove the baggies. But it's not practical in large scale fields. Commercial pollination can help spread pests and diseases. This is one of the reasons why Varroa has become such a problem worldwide. It's even in Australia at this point. But certain crops are very specific when they need pollination. Let's take the almonds in California, for instance. They are blooming the 2 weeks in February, basically. So colonies from all over the United States travel to that very small area in California for 2 weeks out of the year. They're all having a big party. So if anybody's got a pest or disease going on, spreads it to everywhere else, they all go back to their areas in every corner of the US. So we're all kind of having chickenpox parties here. Urbanization and changes in agriculture lead to loss of habitat. Monocropping is not a great thing. You see some flowers flowering all at once, and then suddenly there's a dearth, there's nothing left. So feeding is definitely going to be something that's important. If you've got lots of native flowers and shrubs and trees and things around, then that can really help as well. So colony to collapse disorder is likely due to a combination of stressors. It's not necessarily just one thing. Kind of like, let's see, where are we starting here? It is a bit cyclical though. So poor forage, weather, monocropping, anything that creates poor forage, location leads to poor nutrition, which opens the doors for mites, diseases, and things like that. Pesticides will also lead to more poor forage, and the circle just keeps going around. So something to be concerned about. 30 to 50% losses in the backyard community are pretty common. I think this year we saw a little lower. I think it was 25% losses this year, so we're looking pretty good. But I think I've got another slide up here where we will go over that in more detail. How you can help as far as responsible beekeeping. We're definitely a small community, so a lot of beekeepers will talk. We have clubs all over the state of Oregon. So Lynn Benton Beekeepers Association is our most local beekeepers club. We meet over at the Waldorf School second Wednesday of every month. Always good to get in with the community, let them know what you found. If you've seen any oddities or anything, they'll share their knowledge, you'll share your knowledge, and it's kind of a give and take here. And like I said, you can't learn it all in a day, so just keep going, keep learning, and keep communicating. So as far as getting into beekeeping, when and how to begin, let's get into the meat of things here. So now is a good time to really start thinking about it. Consider cost, start early. The earlier you start, the better chance you're going to have of having everything ready to go once the bees arrive. Beekeeping is a very financially demanding hobby, at least at startup, and it's important to do some research and set a manageable budget. Upfront costs are generally much higher than maintenance costs. Your maintenance costs usually include quite a bit of time, medication, feed, honey harvest, this sort of thing, and winterizing. The upfront costs mostly just out of pocket building, painting, that sort of thing. Beekeeping supplies have become more expensive in recent years, and a whole setup, everything can easily cost around an average rent payment. So it's good to kind of space it out. Consider buying set amounts of bee equipment each month, like the hive skeleton 1 month, just the boxes. Frames the next month, suit, gloves, smoker fuel, that kind of thing. And then you need to have your setup complete and painted by the time the bees arrive, usually mid-April to May. So once the bees arrive, there's not a whole lot of time to get anything done. So this is probably my favorite slide out of the entire class. This is a very general seasonal task in the apiary. I've got it as specific as I can, but weather is going to make changes in this. So this is just kind of an idea of when to start thinking about these tasks. It's still winter up until April. So there's not a whole lot to do actually in the beehives this time of year. You're building new equipment, you're repairing old equipment that's off the hive. Watch for emergency feeding of existing hives. Tap on the hive, see if you have any dead outs, if you need to clean any equipment. Pre-order your bees. Pre-orders are now available for packages and nuke bees. April and May, this is when package and nuke bees will arrive. This is when you'll actually get your beehive going. Feed your colonies, begin your hive inspections, make sure to treat for varroa. Varroa is almost ever present in just about every hive, so it's good to start early and keep on top of those numbers. It's a lot easier to keep the numbers low than to try and drive them low when they're too high. May and June, this is when we're going to taking a break from treating for varroa because this is your honey time. You're going to add your honey supers in May and June. The blackberries are going to be blooming, and this is going to be the major honey flow of the year. So stop your supplemental feeding. The bees are going to have plenty to feed on themselves, and you want them to be storing honey and not sugar syrup. Continue your hive inspections. Make sure you have enough boxes on there. If they're filling up their honey supers, add extra honey supers. On a really good year, you could have a couple honey supers on each hive. July and August, you're going to be harvesting your honey. Continue your hive inspections as always. We're looking at once every 2 weeks, you should be going in to do a hive inspection, make sure everything is working as intended, make sure you don't need to add any equipment or subtract any equipment or things like that. In July and August, you're also watching for late season robbing. Lots of factors can contribute to robbing. Skunks can rob, and they can actually decimate a hive. They like to eat the bees, so they'll scratch at the entrance get the bees to get angry and come out, and they'll just start eating them all. So if you see scratching on the fronts of your hives, you need to start working on something to get rid of the skunks.
How do they not? I mean, you know, how many can they put in their mouth without getting their mouth stung?
That's a good
How do they
question.
do that? I mean,
Um,
the smoke, the stink is something, but
as far as skunks being able to consume bees, I've never actually seen one in action myself, but I do have a friend who has a game cam, and she says, yeah, they'll come up to the hive, they'll start scratching, and they'll just keep eating and eating and eating. And it doesn't really seem to bother them. So I don't know if they just don't get stung or if they're not very sensitive to it, but
1,000 bees would just eat them alive.
usually they're nocturnal. So they come out at night when the bees are more or less asleep, or it's very cold and it's hard for them to fly. So you've got a lot of bees walking out at them, maybe a couple flying, but the skunks definitely got the advantage at night when they come to feed.
Do they use their spray to do anything with it?
I
Spread out,
don't
or-
know if they use their spray at all. I kind of doubt it.
I mean, I've heard of the yellow jacks, and it's kind of nice to have a skunk around if you have yellow jacks, you know.
Mhm. So skunks can definitely be a problem. Other sources of robbing: yellow jackets. The western yellow jacket in particular is quite vicious against honeybees. They will eat the honey, they will eat the pollen, they will eat the bees and the larvae as well. So if you have large populations of yellow jackets, try to reduce your entrances and protect against those yellow jackets as best you can, but they can wipe out a weak colony. So keep an eye on that. The other source of robbing that a lot of people might not think about: honeybees themselves. The researchers call it a form of advanced foraging. So when there is a nectar dearth, there's not a lot out there to go foraging. The foragers don't just decide, oh, well, we're going to stay home, there's nothing to do. They'll go out and they'll look for honey elsewhere, and they'll rob weaker hives and take their honey. So keep an eye out for any scuffles at the entrance, reduce your entrance to make it easy for your colony to defend itself, and just generally be careful, because it's a lot of honey on the hives in July and August, and robbing is definitely something to be concerned about. In September and October, keep a watch out for late season robbing. You're treating for varroa again. You want to get the varroa as small as possible, their populations as low as possible before going into winter, because most treatments can't be applied during winter and you're just kind of waiting it out. As the rains begin sometime in October, you're going to stop your liquid syrup and settle into winter. Bees can't metabolize the 2-to-1 sugar syrup in the winter, and it just adds to the moisture in the hive. So you'll be only feeding solid food at that point. And then you're also going to be adding your winterizing equipment and then rolling right back into winter, November through April. Again, this is a really loose general seasonal task. The months may change a little bit depending on weather, depending on year, depending on forage. But this is basically a year of beekeeping that you're looking at here. What hive setup should I choose? We talked about this a little bit during the history of beekeeping. Bees are really flexible about their houses. I mean, reed baskets insulated with dung will house a bee colony, and they're okay with it. So ultimately, your hive choice should be based on what is manageable and interesting for you as a beekeeper. If you like the hive, you're comfortable inspecting the hive, you're comfortable working this hive, it's going to be better for the bees. So it's important to weigh your options very carefully, because equipment is a big investment. And once you get started, it's really difficult to change equipment. Say you get a 10-frame hive and it's just too heavy, go to an 8-frame hive, you're basically going to have to purchase all new equipment. The frames will stay, but you'll need to get new boxes, and it's going to be a hassle. So know what you want before you get bees in the hive. Weight limitations is definitely a large part of your consideration. Langstroth hives are incredibly heavy. If you're looking at the hive that is right behind everyone here, that is an 8-frame deep box right there. That's going to be somewhere around 80 pounds if it's full of honey. So if you're not comfortable lifting that, you may think about doing a horizontal hive or a top bar hive, where you'd be lifting individual frames at a time instead of an entire box. Method of honey harvest is also something to consider. I talked about the horizontal hives or the top bar hives being really lightweight. You can't spin those in a centrifuge because it'll destroy the frames. The Langstroth hive, you can use a centrifuge, you can spin the honey essentially. So depending on what your honey harvest is looking like, you may need different equipment. And we're going to go over that a little bit more in further slides as well. So what type of hives are actually out there? We are focusing today on the Langstroth hive. There are 2 different sizes. There are hives that will fit 8 frames and then hives that will fit 10 frames. The difference is literally about 2 inches. But it makes a big difference as far as weight is concerned. It's usually about a 20-pound weight difference. There are flow hives, which are adaptations of Langstroth hives. They will work with Langstroth equipment. The flow hive is simply a specialized honey super. So that is a way to go as well. But you have to consider that the flow hive relies on honey flow, relies on really high temperatures for harvest. So it may not work out quite as well as they're saying. It's a wonderful idea, and I've seen it work quite well, but I've got a question in chat here. Can you use just 8 frames in a 10-frame hive? The answer to that is absolutely you can. There are some reasons why you would or would not want to use that. In a honey super, using 8 frames in a 10-frame hive is actually really beneficial because you end up with fat honey. So you have your frames, which are a specific width. You put fewer frames in a box, you've got more space in between. You're going to have way fatter frames. You're going to have a lot more honey per frame. But you also have to watch out because you've got a lot of extra space in there. You've got more than a bee space. So you may have all sorts of weird burr comb and there's just a huge mess in there too. So it's really important that if you're going to use fewer frames than the hive body calls for, that you're doing your regular hive inspections and you're making sure that your removable frames remain removable.
Mhm.
But that was a really good question. And I usually do use 8 or 9 frames in a 10-frame hive for honey supering. As far as my brood box, I stick to 10. Unless it's really, really tight, then I'll do a 9. A couple other hive types out there. The top bar or the horizontal hive are very similar. The top bar hive is a really wide hive, and it just has a bunch of slats laid at the top. And the idea is the bees will draw their own comb and freeform it. So they usually make it into almost kind of like a hexagon shape. It's easy for people who can't lift a whole lot, but it has its challenges as far as treating for varroa and honey harvest as well. The horizontal hive is similar to a Langstroth, but it is a horizontal Langstroth. So the frames are similar, they're slightly larger. I haven't had a lot of experience with horizontal hives, but some of them can be spun in a honey extractor as well. The Slovenian cabinet or the AZ hive is incredibly interesting, but not necessarily easy to work with, at least here. I definitely recommend looking up the Slovenian cabinet hives. There are Slovenian cabin hives as well, which is kind of cool. You'll walk into an entire bee house and they're really beautifully decorated. They're kind of a drawer-like hive. So again, you don't have to lift as much, but there's some challenges as far as maintenance. And then there's the German plastic hive, which could be a number of things and configurations, but the idea is it's using plastic, which has good insulation, it's lightweight, and supposedly it can be cheaper as well, depending on where you go. But the German plastic hive, I feel, is a lot more difficult to source. So consider where are you getting your equipment, how available is your equipment. It may or may not be a good choice for you. Hive placement. So before you build anything or even really get started, think about where you're going to place your hive. It does make a difference if you place it in the sun or the shade or if there's wind issues. So have your hives built, painted, and in place at least a month before your bees arrive. Be comfortable with where your hive is. Make sure that you have the right conditions. How many hives are you going to have? 2 hives are ideal for beginners. A couple of reasons. You can take 2 different bee breeds, say Italian and Carniolan. You'll figure out which breed you like better, which one may be friendlier, which one may build up faster for your area. You can also swap frames around. If you've got a really weak colony and a really strong colony, you can put some brood from the strong colony into the weak colony and kind of build it up. So you can help one hive with another as well. Hives can be marked so bees can recognize home. Bees are particularly adept at recognizing patterns and odd versus even numbers. So if you have a triangle on a hive and a circle on a hive, or 3 triangles on a hive and 2 triangles on a hive, they're going to be able to distinguish which hive is theirs. Hives can be placed side by side, totally fine, as long as you can manage hive inspections on both, leave enough room for the beekeeper to actually move frames and boxes around. They can be completely separated as well. You can have one in the front yard, one in the backyard. One moment here. Sorry about that, guys. I'm having a power issue here. There we go. We're all set. First class of the year. There's always a little hiccup here and there. Exposure. So southern exposure and eastern exposure are best. Everyone knows about early bird gets the worm. Well, the early rising bee gets the most food and survives the winter. You want to protect the entrance from wind. You want them to have an easy flight path and landing area. Morning sun shines on the entrance, which effectively warms the entrance, wakes the bees, gets them out foraging early, and gives them a longer foraging day. Deciduous trees can make good afternoon shade in summer and give good sun in winter. If you're going to be placing your hive underneath a deciduous tree, make sure that you are constantly keeping an eye on it, because the thing about putting hives under trees is trees lose branches, things happen. So make sure you're keeping an eye on them. But I do have mine under a plum tree and it works wonderfully. You want to keep the entrance at least 6 feet from high traffic areas and obstacles. This gives them a good fly zone. They usually do kind of a beeline 6 feet in front of the hive and then take off in whatever direction they're going. So give them their space and they won't bother anybody. Be a good neighbor. Communicate with your neighbors if they're curious. Give them a can of honey once you're done. Always kind of helps to sweeten the mood. Know your local laws. This is just a little bit of information here. We've got more in later slides, but nuisance laws are the only applicable laws to beekeepers with 4 or fewer hives in Corvallis, Albany, and Philomath. You start getting to larger hives, larger apiary sizes, you're going to have some different issues going on. Looks like I've got a question in chat here. Can you put hives on the roof of a shed 8 feet high? You absolutely can. And in certain areas, it's actually kind of recommended. This can help with a different pest. It's not going to fix everything, but it's going to help a little bit with bears.
I say it because when you drive out on Highway 34, it took a while to realize why they had all these bee things on these platforms out there. I think somebody once said, yeah, that's because the bears don't get into them. Although bears climb pretty good, but
they do. So elevation can help with bears and hot wire can help with bears. There is no bear safe honey box. It just doesn't exist. But if the bear hits its nose on the hot wire, that's going to be the saving grace for the beehive right there. So elevation can help, hot wire can help. You can put your hives pretty high up. Actually in Paris, they're going a little bit wild right now with beehives, but they're putting a bunch of beehives on skyscrapers in Paris right now. And you do have to plant a significant amount of forage around that area because having that kind of elevation is going to significantly limit their area that they can forage. So they're kind of working out some issues right now, but they are trying to do a high-rise beekeeping up there, which is kind of interesting. Kind of an aside that we can look up later. All right, so getting into the nitty-gritty of the boring law court. So this Oregon beekeeping registration counts for apiaries of 5 or more hives. If you have 4 hives, you don't need to worry about anything. You're just doing hobby beekeeping. Don't report to anybody. If you have 5 hives or additional hives, then you do need to register with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. This went into place June 2021. So registration needs to be filed before June 1st of each year. This gives the beekeepers time to establish their apiaries, weed out any colonies that aren't going to make it, do their splits, that sort of thing. So only full-sized healthy colonies are counted. Your late season swarms, your new colonies are not counted as colonies. So full healthy colonies are counted. They are going to have registration of $10 plus 50 cents per hive. The proceeds are going to go to fund honeybee research at OSU Honeybee Labs. So keeping it pretty local, we're looking at stressors of varroa destructor. We're looking at honeybee health and research into honeybee forage. You can register with the ODA at this link. Let's see. Oh, we do have a nice handout here at the store as well. Residential beekeeping. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to hand that out to you as well. All right, I've got another question in chat here. Should you have 2 brood boxes or is one plenty? I have seen both for sale. That is a good question with multiple different answers. So when you first get into beekeeping, you're going to want to have 1 brood box with 1 package or 1 brood box with 1 nuke. This isn't going to remain static. This is just to get you started out. That will house your small beginner colony. As the colony begins to grow, you're going to add boxes to it. We're going to go over this a little bit more later, but as you get to about 70% full in the bottom box, you're going to add another brood box on. And typically a full-size colony mid-season is going to have 2 brood boxes plus the appropriate number of honey supers. So 1 in the beginning, and you're going to end up with 2 brood boxes. We are going to start going over Langstroth hive composition and terminology. It's one thing to know what a hive looks like. It's another thing to be able to communicate about the different pieces and actually understand why all of these pieces go together. So I apologize if I'm going a little slow here. I just want everyone to have a full grasp of what the equipment is, what it's called, and what it's for. So going top to bottom here, this is the demonstration hive that we normally have in the bee department. Everyone is welcome to go through this, take it apart, check it out, as long as you put it together again. But this is a really cool learning tool, and I try and keep it up to date depending on what our hives look like out on the field. This is what the demonstration hive is going to look like in the bee department. So definitely go through that. It's a great thing just to play with. The very top here, the lid with the silver lining, this is your telescoping top. It's called a telescoping top because no matter how high or low your hive is, it's always on the top and it moves up and down. There are a lot of different feeder options. The feeder actually is in here, but not enough to really tell it's there. Your Vivaldi inner cover is the next step down. You can have a standard inner cover or Vivaldi. This is a Vivaldi, so it's a little bit taller. But this goes right beneath your telescoping top, and it prevents your telescoping top from sticking to all of your frames. So it's way more important than it looks. We've got 1 honey super here, and as you can tell, the honey super is quite a bit shorter than the other boxes. Mainly this is because of weight. Honey supers get very, very heavy. Baby bees, not so heavy. Liquid honey, really heavy. So smaller box makes a big difference here. And because we're talking 10 frame here, this is a 10 frame. We're pretending it's actually an 8 frame, but we're pretending that this is a 10 frame hive right here. Inside this honey super will fit 10 frames. The queen excluder is not pictured here, but this goes below the honey super. And the queen excluder is going to prevent any eggs or larvae from coming up into your honey. Your honey box is honey only. You don't want the queen getting up there. So that's the only thing it does, is it bars the queen. For those interested in collecting honey. If you're not interested in collecting honey, you don't need a queen excluder at all. The 2 deep brood boxes are basically the home for your honeybees. The beekeeper doesn't take honey from here. They don't do too much with it. They just want to make sure that this is the bee house. It stays clean, it stays disease-free, and you want to make sure that there's enough resources for the bees in these 2 boxes. And because we're dealing with 10 frame equipment, each box holds 10 frames. Your 2 brood boxes are going to have 20 deep frames. This little piece sticking out here at the bottom, just a little stick of wood, is your entrance reducer. It's seems small and insignificant, but this is going to be your best barrier against late season robbing. You can change the size of the entrance right here. So you can have a large entrance, a small entrance. This little piece of equipment is actually really important. The screened bottom board gives you your flight entrance. It gives you extra ventilation, and it gives you a way to check for mites without killing any honeybees. A mite board can fit into the screen bottom board here. And then again, not pictured, we have a hive stand. And the hive stand is really important because it keeps the equipment from being on the ground. It keeps them away from small pests. It keeps them away from moisture. And you can use just about anything for hive stands. I like to use cinder blocks. 2 cinder blocks works perfectly for a 10 frame hive. But you can use pallets, you can use commercial stands. There's any number of things that you can use here. And most beekeepers get pretty creative. So it might be worth a look on Google just to see what everyone else has for their hive stands. I've seen some pretty cool ones. I've got another question in chat. Are hives standard sizes? So a Langstroth hive pieces would be interchangeable with other Langstroth hives. Yes. The 10 frame Langstroth is the industry standard. All the commercial guys, most of the commercial guys use 10 frame equipment. So there is a 10 frame Langstroth size and 8 frame Langstroth size. So a 10 frame box and an 8 frame box don't mix, but all of the frames will fit inside both of those configurations. So when you're buying equipment, make sure you stick with 10 frame if you're going 10 frame, 8 frame if you're going 8 frame, but they are standard. So if you buy a 10 frame piece from this store and a 10 frame piece in Australia, it's still going to be a 10 frame Langstroth. There are a couple of different configurations that you can go with as far as your Langstroth hives. So these are all completed hives before supering. These have just got your brood boxes. This is just the bee house. This isn't any kind of honey equipment. And this is mainly due to management, weight in particular. Your industry standard are these hives right over here, the 2 deep brood boxes. This is what you normally see, but some people like to do all Westerns instead because it's a little bit lighter weight, easier for them to handle. And so if you're doing a brood nest with only Western boxes, you're going to use 3 Western boxes instead of your 2 deep brood boxes. And it works just as well. I have the full Western set up at home, and I have the standard set up here at the store. And I've had really good success with both. Looking at different hive sizes, your 8 frame versus your 10 frame, just as a visual. This literally is the only difference. It's just about 2 inches right here. Your 10 frame holds 10 frames, your 8 frame only holds 8 frames. The weight is definitely going to be a big impact here though. 1 full deep box, 8 frame is going to be about 80 pounds versus 100 pounds for the 10 frame. So it does make a difference when you're getting in there, you're doing your hive inspections and you're having to lift a box completely off. And you're probably going to hear this 100 more times from all the other beekeepers you talk to. If you ask 10 different beekeepers, 10 different answers, you're going to get 15 different answers. So there are a lot of different ways that you can describe a bee box. There are a lot of different names you have for all of the same equipment, so it can get a little bit confusing. So when I'm talking about honey supers, for instance, we could be talking about honey supers, honey boxes, Western hive bodies. They're all names for the same thing. Same with the brood nest. They can be called the brood nest, the brood boxes, the brood chambers, the deep hive bodies, but we're all talking about the large boxes when we're talking about the brood nest. So going to go really slow here. We're going to actually build the hive. Obviously not in person, but we're going to build it on screen here so everyone can follow along. I'm going to start at the bottom, go through what each piece is, interchangeable pieces that you can use, and why it's important that you have them on the hive. Beginning at the bottom with the screen bottom board. This is, like I said before, something that's going to offer you ventilation. It's the base of the hive and it gives you the entrance to the hive as well. When needed, the screen can be blocked by inserting a mite board, and a mite board can be anything white that's easy to see. The idea with the mite board is when you remove the mite board, you're going to want to count the mites on there, but there's going to be a lot of debris and extra things as well. So you want a nice clean white board so that you can kind of pick out the mites from all the rest of the debris.
How big is it a microscopic thing or is it something you can see? Mites?
Mites are very small, but they're not quite microscopic. There's 4 of them in here. So mites are approximately the size of the end of a pintail. They can be perceived, but they're really difficult to spot. It's kind of like hunting for morel mushrooms. They'll be everywhere, but you won't see them until you find your first one.
It's like the size of a flea or something.
Yeah, they're really, really small.
So you can see them,
Yeah, and there are a couple of tricks that you can use as far as looking for mites on your mite board. Most of the debris on your mite board is going to be matte, whereas the mites are actually shiny. So if you take a light and you look through, look for the shiny dots, and those are going to be your mites. Hive boxes or brood chambers. This houses the colony. So inside you're going to find brood, you're going to find honey, you're going to find uncured nectar, you're going to find pollen. All of your workers, your drones, and your queen will be residing in this box among other boxes. But this is basically the core of your hive right here. This is where all the magic happens. Box 1 sets on your screen bottom board. Box 2 is going to be placed above box 1 when additional space is needed. So when your colony fills out about 70% of the bottom box, that's the magic number, and that's when you add the next box. If you add your second box too early, and your bees say have gone across 3 frames, you're going to have a chimney effect. Bees naturally want to move upwards. So you put your box on too soon, you're just going to have 6 frames straight up and down. You want them to go out first and then up. So that's why you wait until they're about 70% full to add the new box. The queen excluder goes directly on top of your brood boxes. This photo here is kind of interesting because this is the Western setup. So your hive bodies are 3 Westerns instead of 2 deeps. There are a lot of different queen excluders that are available. There is the throwaway plastic, there is the metal, which is difficult to clean, and then there's the wood bound, which in my opinion is a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to deal with, but can be a little bit more expensive.
Lowercase, I remember.
Basically all this does is the slots are large enough to allow worker bees to go up and down, but they are small enough to block the queen. So your queen cannot pass through the queen excluder, which means your honey super is going to be guaranteed free of a queen. You're not going to be worried about smashing your queen when you're in the brood, smashing your queen when you're in the honey super. You're not going to be worried about eggs and things coming into your honey. So it's going to be basically guaranteed just honey up here. And this sets on top of your uppermost brood box, like I said before. You want the queen to be in the brood boxes, just not the honey supers. So now we're going to be talking about the honey super, which is going right on top of your brood boxes, on top of your queen excluder if you're using it. This houses honey stores for bees and harvest. Supers can be harvested, replaced back on the hive, and refilled by bees for winter supply. So when you do your harvest, you can put your wet boxes directly back on. They'll clean everything up for you, and then they'll continue to fill that with honey. It's important that you keep enough space on your colony. Every year is going to be a little bit different. So do your once every 2-week hive inspection, see how full your honey super is. If blackberries are on and full and you're starting to run out of space in your honey super, add another one. Chances are you might get a partial or mostly full second honey super. 70% rule goes with honey supers as well as brood boxes. So wait until it's about 70% full to add another box. The cool thing about the honey supers is you can move some frames around. If you're not getting complete coverage in your honey super, move a couple empty frames in, move a couple of full honey frames out. You can effectively fill an entire box even when the bees don't want to go all the way to the outside in this manner. So major nectar flows around here, you're really looking for the blackberries. Once you see the blackberries begin to bloom, that influx of honey is going to start, and you're really going to see them start filling their boxes. So beekeepers are also horticulturists. So keep an eye on the surrounding areas, the surrounding flowers, and you'll kind of get a feel for what the bees are up to as well. 1 to 2 supers are generally used in our location. Depending on year, you may have only 1 honey super in your hive. You may have 2, you may have 5 in an incredible year. Usually that's in warmer climates, but I have seen actually someone up in Kings Valley had a pretty impressive hive. I think she had 6 honey supers on it 1 year. And that is an absolute nightmare when it comes to maintenance, but it was very impressive. So the inner cover is something that can get a little bit confusing. There are a couple different types of inner covers out there. The main functionality of the inner cover is to separate your hive boxes from your lid. Your lid is going over the top of your box in all directions. So if it gets stuck, it's really, really hard to get that thing off. You pry it off, you'll wind up breaking it. So the inner cover serves to prevent that top cover from sticking to the rest of your hive. You can unstick something that's flush with your hive, but something that goes to the top is going to be much more difficult. So a flat board is your standard inner cover. Its only functionality is to prevent the sticking. A Vivaldi inner cover serves quite a few more functions, and I do recommend it. It's great for all seasons. During the active season, this is where you place your top feeder. It makes it really easy to feed. Usually your feeder will hold half a gallon to a full gallon of sugar syrup. And it doesn't really count as getting into your hive if you're just filling that syrup. You're not disturbing the nest. So this is a really effective way of feeding. Once you're going into honey supering, you just remove the feeder that gives the bees extra space to hang out. Just extra space to ventilate, to move around. If you've got lots of population, they'll hang out in here sometimes. During winter, you can put water wicking materials up here. We've got really wet winters, so if you put pine shavings in here, you put burlap in here, you put a moisture board on top of this, it's really helpful in the winter time for extra ventilation and extra moisture wicking as well. The Vivaldi inner cover got its name from John Edwards, who is the owner of Hive and Garden and inventor of the Vivaldi board. He is a music lover, so he named it after the 4 seasons of Vivaldi. Then right on top, we're looking at the telescoping cover. A lot of telescoping covers do come with protective coatings on them, so they're not scratched in the store. So scratch the edge and take that cover off. They should be shiny on top, so that's going to help with weather. This is the lid of your hive. It goes all over all 4 sides, so this prevents rain from getting into your hive. It's heavy enough, the wind's not going to push it over. It helps to regulate temperatures in summer and winter, and always goes above your inner cover. During our really wet winters, it's definitely a good idea to put some excess overhang though. You see just this piece of plywood on top of the hive here that gives the bees a little bit of extra flyaway so that they can leave the hive even in the rain. Not necessary, but definitely helpful. All right, so we're done with the main bodies of the hive, and we're going to start talking about frames at this point.
What's the time schedule on how, I'm just curious, are you gonna go for a while longer?
Looks like we'll probably around another 45 minutes or so.
Oh, really? Huh. Yeah, I didn't know, I thought it was 12. I asked.
Sorry. This is going to be recorded and put on YouTube for later as well. Frame sizes. So commonly asked question, can I use Western frames in a deep hive box? You can, but you have to really keep an eye on it. Because you've got so much extra space, Your Western frame is going to be subject to a lot of burr comb. And the burr comb is usually drone comb, which is a magnet for burrow mites. It can be useful, actually. I use a Western frame in a deep hive box for burrow control sometimes. I'll allow them to build it out. The drone population will be kind of mashed into that area because it's imperfect comb. The queen is kind of drawn to that for drone population. You can cut the drones off, get rid of the mite population. But we're going to go into that more in a different class. We're talking about burrow mite specifically. How many frames do I need? We do offer some bulk discounts on frames. Usually if you get 10 frames, you get 10% off. It's always good to have some extra frames lying around. So if you have a damaged frame, if you have a poorly drawn frame, if you've got just anything comes up, have a couple extra around so you can easily change them out. Your 10 frame hive configuration with 2 deep boxes and 1 Western box, you're going to need 20 deep frames, 10 for each box, and 10 Western frames for your Western box. 8 frame, same thing. 8 frame holds 8 frames, so 16 deep frames for 2 deep boxes and 8 Western frames for 1 Western box. So bee space, this is what L.L. Langstroth became famous for. This is why the Langstroth hive is named for him. He figured out the exact measurement at which bees will not construct comb or fill a space with propolis. This is what makes your movable frame hive remain movable. This isn't always the case. Obviously, bees don't read our books. Sometimes they'll do this weird drawing the wrong direction. We call this cross comb. Get rid of it as soon as you see it, but most of the time the bees will adhere to this bee space and they will draw the comb properly and make it easy to manage. Types of frame and foundation. If you're thinking of the frame as picture frame, the foundation is the picture inside. So there are several different foundations that you can use and several different reasons why you would want to use one over the other. The right cell plastic foundation is the most common these days. The plastic is durable, it's easy to use. The bees do not care about the color. This is beekeeper specific. Usually I will use black foundation for brood boxes because white eggs are easy to see on the black background. And I'll use yellow foundation for honey supers because the honey just looks nicer on the yellow. Old or misdrawn wax can be scraped away with a hive tool, and these frames can be reused. So you don't have to replace the entire frame if there's something wrong with it. These frames can be safely used and spun in the centrifuge, which is a huge benefit. The centrifuge makes harvesting large amounts of honey really easy. Real wax foundation. It's all natural, but it's extremely fragile until it's completely drawn. When you're doing your hive inspections, you're going to have a couple of different things that you're going to need to think about when you're handling your frames. If you tilt your frame the wrong way, the entire comb is going to fall down. You're going to feel really bad. So you got to be careful when you're maneuvering this really delicate wax. This is great for cut comb honey though. It's edible, it's natural, and all you have to do to get cut comb honey is be perfectly on time. You want the wax to be fresh and white and full of capped honey, and then you take the frame, remove the bees, slice it up, and put it in containers, and it's that simple. So if you're going cut comb, real wax or foundationless is probably the way to go. If you want to get liquid honey and spin it in a centrifuge, I would recommend going right cell. Foundationless does have its own problems though. If you want to go foundationless, it's fun, but I would recommend doing foundationless and real wax in combination to help them kind of guide their comb. This is foundationless. All you have is an empty frame. You've got 10 empty frames in a 10 frame box. There's a real possibility you'll get some serious cross comb in there and have to start all over. So it needs extreme attention to detail. Really keep up on your hive visits if you're going to try and go the foundationless route. It's possible, it's beautiful, but there is quite a risk of things going wrong at foundationless. But it's really, really great for cut comb honey. It's beautiful. Drawn comb. This is a little difficult to describe. but all the photos you see right here at the top, these are all undrawn. There's no wax from the bees on these frames. Drawn is something that the bees have filled in. You're going to find about bee size depth on all of the cells. These two photos down here are photos of drawn comb, where the bees have actually made workable cells out of this instead of just a shallow foundation. Once you get your drawn comb, you want to protect it at all costs. It requires a lot of energy for bees to draw this comb out, and you want to be sure that you can use this. So protect it from mice, protect it from wax moths, that sort of thing, so you can continue using these drawn frames. Typically drawn frames will last up to somewhere around 3 years before you should really replace them, because they do get old after a while. Real wax foundation requires a bit more upfront cost and a little bit more upfront work. You're going to need to actually build the frames yourself. We don't sell real wax foundation ready-made frames. So you'll need a couple of things like a hammer, some nails, wiring, and maybe a form board. It's a lot of fun, but it does take a lot of time. As far as tools and apparel, like I said before, I'm just going to go over the absolute essentials. We can look into fun toys and things that make things a little bit easier later. You're absolutely going to need a smoker, a hive tool, and protective equipment. Depending on how comfortable you are around bees, you may want more or less PPE. But for beginners, it's going to be a lot easier just to get the whole setup and lessen your apparel if you're more comfortable later on. But if you're more comfortable in the beehive, the bees are going to be calmer, it's going to be easier to work them. So go more PPE rather than less, at least when you're starting. So that's your full suit with a veil. Fencing around doesn't matter, whatever you're most comfortable with. The photo here has a fencing veil. You want really nice gloves. The thing about the gloves is you really have to have a good fit. You need to be fully protected, but you need to have mobility and you need to be able to really feel what you're doing. So your gloves have to fit really, really well. Full coverage shoes or boots. Something that goes above the ankle is nice. Ankle stings are not fun, coming from me. Your hive tool is basically going to be an extension of your hand. It should never leave your hand while you're working the hive. You can do everything that you normally do with your hive tool in your hand as without. Your hive tool is going to unstick and lift propolized boxes. They're all going to be completely glued together. It's going to unstick and move frames. You're going to be able to lift things with it, unhinge things with it, move bees out of the way. This is going to be your best friend when you get into beekeeping. It usually has a sharp edge too, so you can cut off any burr comb. Burr comb is like a weed to a gardener. It's in the eye of the beholder. A weed is a plant that's in a place where it doesn't belong. So wax is the same. Burr comb is comb on top of the hive, comb in between frames, comb that's just going to make a mess. So you get rid of that burr comb each time you see it. And smoke isn't just for the beekeeper. A lot of people think, oh, well, it's just for the beekeeper. It's really not. It keeps the bees calm. When worker bees sting, they do have a barbed stinger. They leave their sting behind, and it usually is fatal for them. So calmer bees means fewer stings, fewer bee deaths. When you're putting your hive equipment back together again, it also saves lives because you can move the populations of bees from specific areas, get them out of the way so you can put the equipment back together again.
On the suit, is a snug fit recommended over a more roomy fit, or do you want the roomy fit? So
that's a good question. As far as beekeeping suits, what kind of a fit are you looking for? So you're looking for movability more than anything. If it's a little bit baggy, that's okay, but it shouldn't be getting in the way of any of your movement. So when you're trying on a bee suit, make sure you can bend down all the way, make sure you can lift all the way up. You've got a full range of movement. It should be slightly baggy, but it's okay to have a pretty snug fit too. These are not 100% bee proof. None of them are. If you lift a box and you're not paying attention, there's a bunch of bees on the front, and you hug it to your stomach, you'll get stung right through the suit, no problem.
Well, and that's what I was worried about because mine fits snugly on me. And I was wondering if they could sting through it.
Normally, if they land and they try to sting, they're not really gonna get through.
Okay.
But if you smash them into you, that's when the sting gets through.
Okay.
Generally speaking, I've been stung a couple times through my glove and a couple areas that were really, really tight.
I need to go on a diet.
It's around that time of year. I'm with you. Let's see. Reassembling, we talked about that. So the essentials here, social organization. And this is something that I unfortunately don't have a whole lot of time to cover, but is incredibly interesting. There are a lot of things that are specific to certain types of bees. So let's just go over the really, really basic things here. There are male and female bees in the hive. The drones are all the males, and they're going to look significantly different than others. The idea with the drones is they're pretty easy to spot because their wings are about the same size as their body. Their body is kind of rounded. The eyes are really their telltale sign, though. The eyes look kind of like fly eyes, and they're facing upwards. The idea is drone congregation areas where drones gather around active mating season are going to be below the altitude where the queen is going to be flying. So they're always looking up. They're looking for the queen. That's their entire existence, is looking for the queen, trying to mate with the queen. They don't do much else in the hive. So their eyes are built to find the queen above them. They also don't have stingers. So if you've got people who are interested in beekeeping and kind of uncomfortable around bees, drones are fun to play with. They can't sting you. The queen basically has one functionality, and all she really does is she lays eggs, and she lays eggs. She can lay upwards of around 2,000 eggs a day in the active season. She rarely leaves the hive. She will leave the hive as a virgin queen to be mated, and that usually takes about 2 weeks' time. And then once she's fully mated, she'll never leave the hive again unless she swarms. So important thing to note is queen weight. When queens are virgin queens, they can fly. When they are actively laying queens, you see that there's a good brood pattern in there. She's been laying over the last few days. She's too heavy to fly. She can't fly when she's actively laying. So don't worry about her flying off during an inspection or anything. Your workers do literally everything else. Depending on age of the bee, they are going to be performing different tasks. So when they're very young, they first hatch, they are nurse bees. Their job is to feed the other larvae, to clean the hive, to dispose of any dead bees outside of the hive, that sort of thing. And as they get older, they begin to actually leave the hive and to go for forage for pollen and nectar. And once they start foraging, that's pretty much what they do until the end of their lives. A couple distinctions in drone brood. The bees develop inside the cells from egg to larva to adult. They are all called brood in their adolescent stages. But when you're looking around the hive and you see, oh, well, there's a bunch of brood, well, what is it? The worker brood is all going to be flushed. These cells are made for worker larvae. They're beautiful. They're even. The drone brood is not so pretty. Drones are quite a bit larger than workers, and they don't fit in the typical the typical framework. So they're going to be kind of bulbous, and they're going to have convex cappings here. So it's going to be easy to tell worker from drone brood. A lot of beekeepers, when they're doing their hive inspections, will actually get rid of small portions of drone brood because the drone brood are major vectors of varroa mites. Varroa mites can have an extra life cycle with drones, and so they target the drones. They reproduce much faster here because drones have a longer gestation period. So keep getting rid of those drones throughout the season, because really there's enough drones going around to mate with the queens, and at a certain point you just don't need them anymore. They are of no benefit to your hive, but potential benefit to someone else's hive. Getting into bee breeds here, we are actually kind of nearing the end here. They are all Apis mellifera, but there are different breeds within that species. Italian is the most common breed in the US. All the commercial guys use Italians. They have massive colony sizes. They're very gentle. They don't have a huge amount of propolis that they usually draw out. They have high comb building, so you'll produce splits faster. They'll produce more wax. They're really industrious. They're moderately hygienic, but they do have drift issues. Drift being, we talked about how bees are pretty good about recognizing patterns and going to the right house. Drift is when they go to the wrong house. So if they are entering a different hive, they may be taking a disease from their hive to the wrong hive. So drift can be a problem. Painting your hives different colors, having different shapes, different numbers of shapes will definitely help with drift as well. So it's not a major issue, but it is something to consider. The Carniolans are my favorite breed. They are originally from Slovenia and Austria. They are used to cooler climates because of that. They're going to forage earlier and on wetter days than most breeds. They have a really fast buildup in spring. They know where they originate from. The season is short, so they get going real fast. Brood rearing is dependent on available food. The queen will slow her brood rearing if there's not enough forage available, so they're less likely to starve, but they may require more feeding from the beekeeper. They are very hygienic, few brood diseases. With European foul brood kind of on the rise right now, this is something to consider. They also have little robbing instinct. And they're less likely to build burr comb, but more likely to build a lot of propolis. So burr comb is usually pretty easy to deal with unless it's filled with honey. Propolis is just propolis. It's going to be a sticky mess no matter how you look at it. So things to consider. It's a good idea to get multiple breeds in your apiary and just kind of figure out what works best for you. Other varieties that we sometimes see, now and then we will carry queens of Caucasian or standard survivor stock. The Caucasian are from the Central Caucasus near the Black Sea. When we were talking rhododendron honey, these are probably the breed that we were talking about. They're an interesting color. The workers are typically workers, and the queens and the drones show different colors based on breed. With the Caucasians, even the workers are black with gray hairs, so it's a really interesting color. Not your typical honeybee. They have the longest tongue out of all the bee breeds. So they have the widest variety of forage. Kind of interesting there. They have been bred with many different breeds of bees in order to get here. So I think Russian or German is one of their ancestries, which are typically a little bit more aggressive. The Caucasians are gentle until they're provoked, but then they take a while to calm down. So this is something to consider as well. I had a Caucasian hive last year and they were wonderful bees, but you definitely didn't want to take them off. They have a low swarming instinct. So in that respect, they're pretty good for beginner beekeepers. Usually you're not going to have a swarm the first year. It does happen occasionally. My hive swarmed the first year because I was on vacation. I knew it was going to happen and it did anyway. Like the Carniolans though, they are coming from an area that has shorter seasons. So they'll forage earlier in the day and late into the evening. And the standard survivor is kind of a good mix of all the breeds. They are essentially bee mutts, and mutts make the best dogs, right? So they're bred for hygiene, low propolizing, easy to work, high populations and low swarming instinct, good foraging. As far as installation and time of installation, you may want to consider using package bees or nuke bees. Couple differences between them. The package bee, typically quite a bit cheaper, and they're going to arrive earlier in the season. We're looking at probably April for package bees. They're essentially an artificial swarm taken from commercial hives. So you've got bees from a lot of different hives in your box here. Going to be probably about 10,000 strong. They arrive earlier than nukes. They're less expensive than nukes, and they're good for beekeepers who have equipment already and they're just looking for the bees. So if you've got drawn frames, this is perfect. Get them started on the drawn frames, get them working. You can put a package on fresh comb as well. I have done that before and it is really, really beautiful to see, but you do have a lot more work getting them built up. If you don't have any drawn frames, you're going to need a lot of feeding in order to get those combs drawn out and to really start working. They don't start with any brood because they don't have any comb. So this makes them easy to medicate for varroa, but a little bit slow to start building population. So nukes. Nuke is short for nucleus hive. It's essentially a portable hive, a small hive. It includes 5 drawn frames, a loose laying queen and her colony. Typically speaking, these are from old colonies and just all kind of put together. So they're kind of established. They're good for brand new hives. This year we are having a slightly different setup. We're doing fresh nukes. So the idea is all of those frames will be drawn, but they won't be old frames. They're going to be brand new white wax frames. So this is going to help with disease buildup, pesticide buildup, that sort of thing. We're hoping that they do really well this year. Nukes, best benefit of nukes probably is that they're really easy to install. If you're brand new to beekeeping, it makes it a lot smoother when you don't have to dump a package of 10,000 bees. You just move the frames right over. It's super, super smooth. And you also have the nuke box when you're done. The nuke boxes are insanely handy. You can make them into beekeeping tool chests. You can use them for swarm catching later. They're just useful to have around. If you need to make a split and you don't have an extra box set up, you can make a split into the nuke. It's good to have nuke boxes around.
Can you capture a swarm with a nuke box?
You can absolutely capture a swarm with a nuke box. Nukes will come a little bit later though than packages. They're about a month later. Swarms have the benefit of being free. So you don't have to worry about cost as far as swarm. The problem with swarms is there's never any guarantee of finding one. Looks like I got a question in chat. Let's see. If you have 2 different breeds in hives next to each other, is drift still a problem and are they interchangeable? They are interchangeable. You can add brood from one colony to another. They're still apis mellifera. They'll still accept the brood. Drift can still be a problem, especially since the workers are going to look alike. Painting your hives with different symbols, different colors, different numbers of things will actually help with drift as well. But the 2 different breeds, Italian and Carniolan, for instance, are definitely interchangeable. And what are costs for packages and nukes? Let me double check real fast. So it looks like this year, cost for a 3-pound package is $185, and nukes, I will have to double check, but I think we're looking at $225 for nukes this year. So there is quite a bit of a cost difference, but nukes are a little bit easier to install because you don't have to install them the day they arrive. Nukes can sit in your nuke box as long as they can fly and forage up to about 5 days. So that gives you a greater window for installation. Whereas the package bees, this is a really vulnerable swarm. This is going to need to be installed the day it arrives. Nukes and packages are incredibly weather dependent when we get them. So usually I know about 2 weeks before land. So I will let everyone know, hey, pickup is in 2 weeks. If you can't be there right away on package day, it can be an issue. If you can't be there right away on nuke day, I can hold them for 5 days. So it gives you a little bit of extra flexibility if you go the nuke route as well. Good questions, thank you. Looking at swarms, so there's no guarantees of finding a swarm at all. There's no guarantee that you know the breed, the gentleness, the hygienic behaviors. You're kind of doing a shot in the dark here. You may get bees, but you may not know exactly what you're getting. But that's kind of the fun of it too. Joining your local beekeeper clubs can really help because a lot of them do have phone trees for swarms. So you can sign up for, I want to capture swarms in this specific part of Corvallis, like Southtown or something, or I want to capture swarms anywhere, sign me up for Albany, Corvallis, Philomath, whatever it is. That can really help out, but you really do have to be there at a moment's notice. Swarms rarely stay in one place for very long. So you may have hours, you may have a day. And it's free bees, so everybody wants it, and there's multiple people on the front tree. So to capture a swarm, everyone kind of has their own different tool chest, but the basic things you're going to need are your container for your bees. Nuke boxes do work really well. You can use a 10-frame hive box with a sealed bottom and top too, as long as you have some kind of container that you can seal with a little bit of ventilation and install it right away. You're going to need your PPE, your smoker, and your hive tool. A bee brush can be helpful, and location-specific items. Depending on where the swarm is, you may need pruners or loppers to cut a branch. You may need a ladder to get to a high spot. Please be careful on ladders. Ladders and bees have a lot of potential for issue. Swarming bees are generally very gentle. The idea with a swarm is the bees are reproducing at a colony level. So instead of the queen laying babies, the entire colony is splitting in half and creating 2 colonies. The swarm doesn't know when they're going to find their next home. So before they leave their original hive, all the workers are going to gorge on honey, and they're going to be so full they can barely fly. And when their honey stomach is extended, if you look at a cutaway of a bee, you can see that when their honey stomach is completely gorged, their stinger is locked in place. So they can't really sting when they're gorged with honey. Not to say every single bee is going to be gorged, but most of the bees are going to be very docile when they're in a swarm. Another good question in chat. Is there a way to prevent your own bees from swarming? That's a yes and no question. There are things you can do to help prevent your bees from swarming, but ultimately it is a natural process, and if the bees really want to swarm, they're going to do it. Bees swarm for a number of reasons. They usually swarm when they're very healthy. So swarming is usually seen as a good thing depending on time of year. You can ensure your bees have enough space. If they run out of space, they may swarm or abscond. Abscond is, rather than splitting in half, the whole colony leaves the coop. So make sure that they have room to expand and will be more comfortable staying in the same area. Make sure they're well fed, they have everything they need. And when you're doing your once every 2-week hive inspection, look for queen cups. I showed you the difference between brood as far as drone and worker. Unfortunately, I don't have a photo of queen brood in here, but the idea with queens is they're going to look very different. They're much larger than workers, they're much larger than drones, and the orientation is going to be different. When you're looking for queen cups or developing queen bees, they're going to be hanging vertically from the frame rather than standing out horizontally like most of your other bees. So you want to cut away those queen larvae and make sure that you don't have a virgin queen hatch. That's the signal for the old queen to leave when her daughter hatches and can take over the hive. So a couple of different things that you can do, but there's not a surefire way of absolutely stopping them. Splitting is another way that you can help prevent your bees from swarming. And effectively, a split is an artificial swarm. The beekeeper is enabling the swarm, but controlling it. So when your hive is getting ready to swarm, they want to swarm, you take your old queen and a portion of the bees, and you take a portion of your old hive equipment. So you've got 2 deep brood bodies, you take 1 deep brood body and set it in a new area. So effectively, you've taken your swarm out of your colony and placed it where you want it. And that can be very simple or very involved, but we're definitely running out of time. So I think we're going to go over that in the next class. Basics on inspections and feeding. I've been talking about this a couple of times during the class. You want to really be religiously doing your hive inspections once every 2 weeks. The reason we're talking once every 14 days is because it takes a queen bee 16 days to hatch. And that's swarm prevention right there. You don't want your queen bees to be hatching. You want to be taking care of those queen bees before they hatch. Sugar feeding is something that you're going to want to be doing for upkeep. You want them to constantly have an inflow of nectar. During spring, 1-to-1 sugar to water. This is going to simulate a light nectar flow. It's going to tell the bees, hey, the nectar flow is coming. We need to build a whole bunch of extra wax. We need to have room for all of this. It's really going to help jumpstart your colony to start feeding. In the fall, after you've done your honey harvest, you're going to want to increase the sugar to water ratio and have a really thick sugar syrup, a 2-to-1 ratio. This is going to increase your reserves. We'll actually store 2-to-1 sugar syrup. So this is going to help for winterizing. And protein feed. Protein patties, like you see in this photo here, are pollen substitutes. Pollen isn't always readily available in the environment, so it's a good idea to have a protein patty on your hive at all times. You can kind of gauge how quickly they eat the protein patty and put more or less patty on, but it's a good idea always to have one on so that it's always available. If the queen doesn't have enough protein in her diet, she can't lay eggs. And if she can't lay eggs, the population decreases and you wind up with a colony collapse. Here, and we're going to get going again with integrated pest management with Varroa. Varroa mites are a worldwide problem. Until I think the early 90s, I think is what it was. It was just about everywhere except for Australia. Australia now has Varroa as well. So Varroa mites are a concern for every beekeeper everywhere. Depending on if you're getting a package or a nuke, you may start your treatments in a little bit of a different manner. You may use different treatments. Here at Chenard's, we only use naturally derived treatments. So Apiguard we use, which is derived from the thyme plant. And Formic Pro we use, which is derived from a natural chemical inside many living organisms called formic acid. You find it in honeybee stings, you find it in ants, it makes them smell bad. It's even present in humans to an extent. But I tried to stay away from the chemical miticides because the Varroa mites may build up a resistance to those, whereas the natural medications will work a little bit longer and a little bit better. So when receiving packaged bees, no brood is present, which makes treating a little bit easier. Many treatments, you have to take into account that they will not penetrate brood cappings. So say you're using Apiguard, this is one of the treatments that won't go through your brood cappings. If you have brood in your colony, you're going to have to do 2 treatments. One treatment treats all of the active bees and the uncapped larvae. The second treatment is when your capped brood emerges and becomes adult, and it's treating that population. So how and when to treat a package. You will install your package as soon as you get it. You will immediately feed with sugar and with protein. Wait 5 to 7 days. This allows bees to become settled and begin drawing comb. They still haven't really gotten any capped brood, which is nice, but they have settled into their hive. They realize this is home. They're not going to just fly the coop if something weird happens. Daytime temperature should be between 60 and 103 degrees for Apiguard. Can be a little bit difficult in April to get 3 days worth of 60-degree weather, but we'll all do our best here. Treat with 1 tray of Apiguard. The instructions are for a full-size colony with brood. So with a package, only 1 tray is needed. Because you don't have any capped brood, you're treating the entire population and it is a small population. So 1 tray should be sufficient here. Treatment is complete after 7 to 14 days or when the tray is empty. So if you start your once every 2 week inspections, you'll be able to figure that out pretty readily at the 14-day mark. Remove the tray and continue feeding and building your colony strength up until the summer nectar flow. This is going to get you to the summer nectar flow. Join me in my next class, which will be hive inspections and problem solving. It hasn't been scheduled yet, but we're expecting probably, let's see, sometime in March, I would say, if I were to guess. You can watch a short video on the application of Apiguard on our YouTube channel. I got it linked right here, or you can just type in Chenard's treating for Varroa.
Okay, I have a couple questions.
Okay.
When you're treating, do you put this in the feed tray up above or?
That's a good question. The video is going to clarify exactly where you place it. But as far as the ApiGuard is concerned, they do need space to actually get into the ApiGuard tray. We're going to go over this a little bit more in the next class, but the idea is you place the tray directly on top of your frames, you peel the label most of the way back, and then you add an extra spacer so that they can climb up into the ApiGuard tray and physically disperse it throughout the hive.
Are you still feeding them or are they eating that?
I usually wait until the treatment is over to start feeding again. And it's actually helpful not to feed during ApiGuard treatment, because if you're using a Vivaldi inner cover, you remove the feeder, flip the feeder upside down, and that gives them the space they need to get into the medication tray. Make sure to flip it back though, or your burr comb problems are going to be a nightmare. Not fun to watch them burr that badly.
It's for real estate.
Yeah. End up making some candles. So integrated pest management for nuke bees. This is going to be a little bit of a different story because your nukes are going to arrive with capped brood. And they're going to be a little larger population, hopefully. So there's going to be some different treating methods here. Nuke bees can come from many different hives and should be treated for varroa once established. Lots of different hives, lots of different opportunities for varroa mites. So nobody is safe here. Because nuke colonies come with capped brood, treatment options are more limited. Most medications require multiple applications because they don't penetrate the brood cappings. So a portion of the colony is not treated at first application. Formic Pro is the exception to this rule. It does penetrate brood cappings and only one strip is needed for a nucleus-sized colony. The thing about Formic Pro is while it's a naturally derived medication, it is very strong. And if you apply too much, you can actually harm your colony. So when and how to treat a nuke, you want to install and feed your nuke with sugar and protein. Same with the package. You want them to get established. You want them to realize this is home. You don't want anything bad to happen for a little while. You don't want them to abscond and fly the coop. So you wait 2 to 3 weeks until the bees are established and they're beginning to expand. Like I said before, Formic Pro is a very strong product and you want a certain population before it's safe to treat it all. So you want at least 5 frames or more to be drawn and actively being worked by your bees before you start treatment. Daytime temperature range is a little bit easier than the ApiGuard. It's more of a concern in summer. So 50 degrees to 85 degrees for the first 3 days of treatment. And those are daytime temperatures. It can get cold at night, that's fine. You need the temperature in order for this to work because it is a fumigant. Very powerful fumigant. Don't get your nose too close to this stuff. You lay 1 strip of Formic Pro on top of your frames running perpendicular to them. So the exact same way you would feed protein. Got the protein patty right here. This is what the formic acid strip is going to look like. And then 7 to 14 days, just like the ApiGuard. When the formic strip becomes a dry cake, it's no longer fumigating and you can safely throw that out. You continue feeding and building your colony strength for the summer nectar flow. And again, hive inspections and problem solving, we'll be going over varroa mites and treatment in more detail. And we do have a video for applying Formic Pro on our YouTube page as well.
Can we sign up for the hive inspection class yet, or do we need to wait?
That's a good question. Signups, unfortunately, for the next class haven't been released yet. Keep an eye on our website, classes and events, and we've got it listed there. So it'll probably be listed 3 or 4 weeks before class, then you can sign up then. We also have Chenard's Facebook page for the beekeeping department, and we'll keep everybody updated on class schedules there as well. And getting to resources, I swear we're almost done. Online resources, we've got quite a few areas where you can take a look. Updates on our Chenard's Beekeeping Facebook page. We're going to keep you updated on when packages and nukes are arriving, when good treatment periods will be, when good feeding periods will be, just interesting facts here and there, pollinator plants, that sort of thing. We're actually going to hopefully be doing a photo contest this spring too, so that'll be kind of fun. Our YouTube page is a great resource, especially for beginner beekeepers. We've got lots of tutorials on our page. If you go to playlists, there's a beekeeping playlist and you can just go through that. It makes it a little bit more organized. We have written tutorials on our website. Our website is being upgraded, so this may be unavailable for a couple of days, but they will become available again shortly. And
Did you say you had that handout that has the seasonal upkeep that you're doing every?
I don't have a handout for it, but I'd be happy to print it for you.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. I'll take it home and.
Okay. And we're going to be posting this on YouTube as well, so it's always going to be available there. And the Honeybee Health Coalition has got a really cool tool as far as Varroa management. So if you go there, you can take their little test and see if you need to treat for Varroa, timing for Varroa, all sorts of just different information on how Varroa mites affect your colonies. And paper resources. I usually just like to grab a good book, and as you can see, I read it all the time. But there's just something comforting about information that's not going to change every 5 minutes, and being able to grab that book whenever you need it. The Beekeeper's Handbook is my go-to. There's the 4th edition out right now. I have the old edition, so you may see this copy as well. The Backyard Beekeeper is interesting because it focuses not only on Langstroth, but also on top bar hives in a couple different configurations. So interesting to check that one out. Garden Plants for Honeybees is a really awesome resource, but unfortunately it is out of print, so it's kind of hard to find. The cool thing about it is you can flip through and it's organized by month and by bloom cycle. So you can look at different pollinator plants that may be blooming in our area for January or for March or something like that. And it has a 5-star rating of how much pollen to nectar is around. So Sarcococa, for instance, is a wonderful pollinator plant for really early spring or late winter. It has a lot of nectar. It's a really great resource. So it's going to have a 4 or 5-star rating. The Hive and Honeybee is a wonderful source of information, that it is a little pricey. That's the book down here. It is a multi-author book. So each author has made their life work to make a chapter of this book. So you've got bee biologists looking at the legs of bees. You've got bee historians looking at the early history between a certain date and a certain date of bees. This is really specific, really interesting information, and it's really, really well written, but it is a little on the pricey side. Honeybee biology and beekeeping is also a really great read. Dewey Caron is one of the leading researchers on beekeeping, and he's actually pretty local. You can see him at Lynn Beekeepers Association. I think March or April is when he speaks, but he speaks once a year and he does the honeybee loss survey. So all really interesting reads, excellent information throughout, and it's a good idea to look at multiple, get multiple opinions on beekeeping, because there's a lot out there. And I think that's just about all I've got for you today. Thanks for putting up with me. There is one additional thing. For all of you who attended online, we do have a promo code for 10% off your total purchase. If you purchase it today, you can pick it up later. Once you get to your cart, type in 10 class, and that'll give you a 10% off promo code. And we do have a couple coupons for everyone today for 10% off your purchase, which is just today as well. And thanks again, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you shortly.
Thank you.